Hey y'all, happy Thursday. So let's dig back into this lance of prayer. So yesterday we ended with another minister who had actually called it the spear of influence, and that prayer would be this spear, it would be this lance. And how in the world would prayer influence? Well, prayer plays a mighty and a vital role in our circumstances and situations. And so the prayers that we pray do actually influence situations and circumstances. And so if that's another way that you want to think about it, this lance, call it a spear, and the spear of influence, that our prayers do make a difference. And why in the world would there be so many lances? Why use prayer for the lance or the lance for prayer? Why? Well, probably as we've already been talking, you've been pulling some things out as to how prayer and lance could be used together, or how they could be analogous of one another. Well, as many different types of lances as there are, and if you really dig into the pictures and you really dig into the book, they all had different types of heads. They had different shaped heads. Some were iron, some were hollow on the inside, and you could weight the head of the lance. And so of course the heavier the head of it, the harder it would hit when it fell, that it would also carry it farther. Some of the shafts were made of wood, some of the shafts were made of iron. And actually by New Testament times, the lance that the Roman soldiers carried at that time were about 6 feet long. So even at that, I'm thinking about 6 feet. So that's like a person-ish, give or take. I'm not 6 feet tall. So this lance, this weapon that these men carried in the pouches on their backs, would be as long as a person is tall. Again, that's a serious weapon. And I know we talked earlier in the week that a lot of times believers think that all we can do now is pray. Well, that's probably where we should have started with. All we can do now, we should have started with prayer. And truly, as we dig into studying about prayer and different types of prayer, I pray that we will recognize and that we will see that prayer truly is a vital part of the battle, and it truly is an influencer, and it is necessary. It is a mighty and dangerous weapon in the hand of a believer, true followers of Christ. It's time that we stop watering down, what the Lord's given us and who He's called us to be. We talked about in Women in the Word for April that we were not saved to sit in a pew and wait for the rapture. We have been given power and authority. We have been given mighty weapons of warfare to make a difference and to do something in this earth. Jesus as our example, not just an example in every way. He was not just an example of love and humility, but he was an example of power and authority, miracles, of unhindered access and relationship to the Father. And so as Rick talks about so many different types of lances, well, there are different types of prayer that are available to us. And I think one reason that we don't value prayer as much as we could is that maybe we're afraid we're going to do it wrong. Is it too deep for us to figure out? Absolutely not. The Lord has not put anything that is of Him for us that is outside of our grasp of comprehension. Paul prays, in Ephesians chapter 1, you start at verse 17 and you go through the next 5 or 6, and he says, I pray that you would be enlightened with the spirit of wisdom. He says that you would know all the mysteries and secrets, revelations into the depths of Him. And so by the Spirit of God who lives and communes with us, we can understand. So prayer is not something that's to be scary, and it's not something that we should keep on a shelf for special times. My sister and I were meeting with someone. This was about a business transaction, and he was going through a kind of difficult time in his body. He was struggling with sciatica, very, very painful. And he said, I don't want to waste a prayer on this. And our hearts broke, because waste a prayer? You're not limited in your prayers. You don't have a certain number and then God cuts you off. And so I do think that we as believers have shelved prayer, and that we have kept it maybe only for those special times and occasions because we don't want to waste it. Friend, you are not going to waste your prayer. Any breath that you utter in communication and in fellowship and in talking with the Father is not wasted. So, go for it today. For whatever comes up, go for it. It's not wasted. You're not going to lose one. He's not tallying it or marking it off, or punch in your ticket that you've used this one, and it just does not work like that with the Father. So don't be afraid to use your lance. All right, so we'll dig in here tomorrow. I'll see you then. Bye, y'all.